Welcome everybody to week number 4. This week you were assigned to read chapters 7 and 8 in the Oliva book, and I want to spend a little bit of time focusing on one particular aspect of chapter 7. And that's where Oliva talks about the importance of really making sure that your curriculum development is focused on the development of skills that are going to prepare students for the world that they're going to head out into. So we talked about the importance of attending to student and societal needs in curriculum development. And there's a couple of books that I want to kind of direct you to in terms of that really discuss how different our world is today relative to the world that the previous generation grew up in. And one of them is this book called The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, which it's focused on how the world has changed and how that impacts education and how it impacts what types of things we need to be teaching students today. Very readable, really interesting. And the second, I think, should be mandatory reading for just about every educator. The Global Achievement Gap. And it's about the gap between what most of our schools, even our best schools, teach students and what they most need. And Oliva gets into this a little bit in chapter 7, and I think it's just extraordinarily important, where he talks about we need to make sure we're focusing curriculum and instruction on the development of what are called 21st century skills. And so I wanted to talk about what are those skills and why they matter and what we need to make sure that we're keeping in mind as we develop curriculum. So first of all, why do they matter? Well, the world has changed. You know, that book, The World is Flat, talks about how it's more of a knowledge economy today rather than manufacturing, and the communication is so easy because of the internet, and travel is so easy that it's really connected the world in a way that even a generation ago wasn't possible. So the industrial economy based on manufacturing has shifted to a service economy driven by information, knowledge, and innovation. The second one is this new world requires a different set of skills, right? So that book, The Global Achievement Gap, was focused on interviewing 200 different companies from a variety of different fields and asking them what they most need. And the consensus was that employers today look for workers who can respond flexibly to complex problems, communicate effectively, manage information, work in teams, and produce knowledge. It really is more a matter of what you can do with what you know rather than what you know. 20 or 30 years ago, it may have been necessary for students to memorize a bunch of information to carry it out in their heads. Today, anybody can Google just about anything. So knowledge is available to everyone, but it's a matter of, do you understand how to use it, when it's appropriate, and how it's connected to other pieces of knowledge. So that's vastly different from the schools that a generation of people grew up in. So this is why it matters. And so what do we actually mean when we're talking about 21st century skills, right? So again, it's the skills students need to succeed in school, work, and life in the 21st century. And it has very little to do with actually memorizing information or carrying knowledge around in one's head. It's about critical thinking and problem solving. Can students solve problems where the method of solving it may not be obvious, and then there may be actually multiple solutions? Are we really preparing students to be able to do that in schools, or are we just continuing to have them memorize a bunch of information? Collaboration. It's really important for people to be able to work with other individuals who don't look like them, who may come from different backgrounds, who may speak a different language, who may have very different perspectives, but we need to be able to collaborate with them to solve problems. Our school is preparing students to be able to do that. We need to develop students who can lead by influence rather than leading by authority. It's not a matter of kind of leading by saying, you need to do exactly what I say because I have a certain position, but it's a matter of leading by what you do and leading by how you interact and collaborate with others. Very different. It's so important to be flexible today, and to be okay with ambiguity, because the world is changing so rapidly and most people are going to have multiple careers. Are we preparing students to be able to adapt to that change in a really productive and successful way? Things like Shark Tank are not an accident that we see on TV today, that we're in an age of entrepreneurialism and initiative where taking the initiative and trying things is really rewarded and expected. Not just from, so almost any organization you work in, it's expected you're going to take initiative and look for solutions to problems before you're necessarily being told, right? This never goes out of style. It continues to be really important. But with the advent of Twitter and texting, people are tending to kind of lose the ability to communicate orally or in written form really, really effectively. And I think, skills we've seen them deteriorating. So being able to communicate well still matters. We need to make sure that we're continuing to teach those skills really well in schools. There's so much information available. Are we teaching students how to access and analyze that information to understand what parts of that information are valid and reliable, which parts aren't? Crucially important. All that information can be overwhelming, but it won't be useful unless students know how to access it and analyze it well. We want to be developing creativity, curiosity, and imagination. To solve the complex problems that are out in the world today requires these things. And increasingly, employers are looking for them. And lastly, character matters. So personal responsibility, some type of sense of social responsibility for the world, the greater world out there. Employers are looking for this. And so character is something that hasn't gone out of style, and it's kind of expanded to not just personal ethics, but kind of a social sense of ethics as well. So this is what we mean by 21st century skills. And Oliva says, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, it's really important that as we're developing curriculum, we're looking at ways that we can make sure that we're developing these types of skills. So how does that differ from the traditional classroom of maybe 20 or 30 years ago? Here are some different ways that kind of Oliva kind of points out the difference. Previously, classrooms and education tended to be focused on memorization, as I mentioned previously. And in this century, it needs to be focused on critical thinking and how we use information. Previously, there was more of a passive learning where the teacher got up and told students, here's what you need to know on the test. Now it's more of a focus on getting students actively involved through collaboration, through projects, through other ways, involved in their learning. So we're not just telling them what to do and what to think, but they're involved in helping to create some of their own knowledge. Students 20 or 30 years ago work in isolation. Now we're trying to get students working in groups as much as possible to solve problems and create things. Very much teacher-centered, right? Sage on the stage versus student-centered today. So the teacher has gone from just disseminator of information to coach and guide more than before, 20 or 30 years ago. A fragmented curriculum where students would go from math to English to history and science, and there would be no obvious way that those subjects were connected, to in the 21st century classroom, helping to make sure that there are interdisciplinary classes and an interdisciplinary curriculum where students see the connections between those things, because science and math and English and history don't exist in isolation from one another in the real world. They're actually very much intimately connected with each other. Learning and assessment via print, just reading things from a book, to today students learning in a variety of different ways and being assessed in a variety of different ways, because the world in which they live in is not just a print world. It's a rich world with various different types of technology. So as you're thinking about developing a curriculum, you need to make sure that you're mindful of the ways the world has changed and developing a curriculum that is helping to develop those 21st century skills that we need our students to have as they enter the world. Thanks so very much. And if you have any questions about chapters 7 or 8 or anything in this video, don't hesitate to reach out to your instructor.